presentation. If you have questions of a personal nature, please wait until after she's finished her presentation, and then Chasidy will be more than willing to answer any questions or have a private chat afterwards. Okay, without further ado, Chasidy, welcome.
Come on! Welcome, thank you so much for coming. Because I'm a counselor, I'm going to go right into a visualization for you all and tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit more about myself afterwards. So if I can get you all to close your eyes to start off with, please. I'm going to tell you a story of Janet. Janet is 24 years old and she lives with her mom and dad in North Vancouver. She has been sent to Langara College for a year after high school to learn about psychology. She began gaming, which means using video games, when she was halfway through high school and began missing some classes. At Langara, she started to miss appointments and started sleeping in during the days. She eventually failed out of school and just hung around for the next year. She would not really talk to anybody in the house and just sat around a lot saying she was depressed. Her mom and dad both tried to help her by setting up doctor's appointments, then driving her there. They would ask their friends, do you have any place that, might want to hire Janet? We're helping our daughter out. Although Janet went to these interviews, she often went unwillingly. She did manage to get a job at a coffee place and worked for about a couple of weeks, but she soon lost that job too because she was always late. Janet felt awful about herself and was not motivated to do anything. The only thing that seemed to get her up and going is when she would go online late at night and play these group online games. Although she enjoyed playing, she felt guilty about doing it so much that she was unable to get up in the morning and often most of the day could not do anything. She felt ashamed that even though she planned to go on for just a short time, she was often up all night on the computer. She did eventually make it to a counseling appointment that her mom made for her, and she began to work on her addiction issue. She did really well for about a year. She was even accepted into UBC. She felt happy and was in control. So she thought, why not try and play this 15-minute game? As you can well imagine, this 15-minute game turned into longer, and the cycle began to repeat itself. You may open your eyes now. How do you feel about hearing that story? What's that like for you?
Depressing.
Depressing. Absolutely. Why?
No solution, no resolution.
Because there's no solution that you saw and there's no resolution. Yeah. And that's often how we feel when we're in an addict's life, is that right? What else did you feel when you were listening to that story?
Repetition.
Repetition. That's right.
Like helpless.
Helpless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't do anything. Totally. Yeah.
She was weaker than her addiction.
She was weaker than her addiction. That's what you felt. And that's what often people feel. Absolutely. Is addiction about weakness? There's no right answer. I'm just asking. Some people think yes, and some people think no. Right? There's people that say either side, but it's definitely a feeling. What were you gonna say?
For the family, like it wasn't just her, other people.
Other people are impacted other than just her. The whole family was impacted, that's right. What do you think Janet's mother felt like? She was the one that was driving her to the appointments. This is a true story, by the way. I've got permission to use this from a client of mine. Addictions aren't only about alcohol and drugs, even though often that's what they're associated with. What do you think the mother felt like?
Struggling.
Struggling. Absolutely. Struggling with what?
Your daughters.
How do I help my daughter? Right? I just want the best for my daughter. What can I do for my daughter?
We're trying to fix it too.
And trying to fix it. Absolutely. Right? Who here, just by a nod of your head, who here has tried to fix a problem that wasn't their own, whether it's addiction or not? Right? And whose behavior can you control?
On your own.
Oh my gosh, can we say that one more time?
On
Whose
your own.
behavior can you control?
Your own.
Okay, because that's the take-home message from tonight. We're going to talk a lot about that. Okay? How do you think Janet feels?
Discouraged.
Discouraged, absolutely. She's trying, right? She's going to things, she's getting up, she's doing the best that she can, right? she's discouraged. I heard some more over here.
I just said she feels awful.
She feels awful.
But she could be bad too. She doesn't know that I'm being bothered. I'm not ready for it. I'm thinking of bothering me.
Exactly.
She can feel that.
A lot of times, the person with an addiction issue is not ready. They're not ready to make changes.
Like a failure or guilty?
Like a failure or guilty. Failure and guilt and shame, huge. Absolutely huge. Right? Not only for the person with the addiction, but also for the family. Wish I brought some Kleenex with me. I don't have any Kleenex with me, but this may touch the nerves with everybody. The reason why we're here, however, I wanted to explore some of the feelings because there are things that you can do as a family. Okay? And as, even a friend of someone with an addiction issue. One of the things about the feelings that's really important too is that they're your key to what's not right. When you start feeling a certain gut feeling that's not feeling quite right, who's felt that feeling before? Right? Something's not quite right, whether it's in relation to the addiction or not. That's your cue that something needs to change. There's something not right. Right? So that's why I'm tuning you into your feelings. Also noticing how other people might feel. Okay? Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about me, why I'm even up here talking about addictions. I worked for the Vancouver Coastal Health Authority for 7 years in a variety of positions. I started out in the downtown east side at Main and Hastings. Is a drop-in center called the Health Contact Center. And the entrance was in an alleyway just behind Carnegie. I worked there for a couple years, working with people who were on the street. From there, I went to Vancouver Detox. I worked with people that were trying to recover from detoxification, the detoxification process, trying to recover from addiction. And also then went to Vancouver Coastal Health, the Vancouver General Hospital, and the 2 psych wards that we have there, the acute unit and the brief intervention unit, which is a little bit more longer term units. From there, I worked in the occupational health department, and then I started my own private practice. So I'd say probably about a third of what I do is addictions work. I'd say about a third of that is actual people that have addiction, like people that are addicted. The other 2/3 of that are families that I work with. So a little bit different, because I think a lot of people do think that the person with an addiction issue comes to me, but often it's actually more times than not, it's the families and the friends that actually need help. So that's pretty much what I do. I have a private practice in North Vancouver. I want to know what you guys want to know about today's talk. I have everything prepped, but I don't have to go this way. I'm here for you. So however you want today to go, I will give you information on what you want. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you would like to know today? I'll write it down, make sure that I touch upon everything. What do you want to know about today's talk? Why'd you come? What would be most important? If you left here today with one nugget of information, what would it be?
Boundaries.
Boundaries? Awesome. Already prepped into my talk. Love it.
Local resources?
Local resources? Got that already? You actually may have already had a handout on your chairs talking about some of the addictions resources. Right? Everybody got a piece of paper like that? Just in case I don't touch on them all, you have them written down.
Help without enabling.
Help without enabling. Wow, that would be awesome.
That's a good one. Very good.
I guess what is the same thing, but do you know where that line is between helping and enabling?
What's the difference between help and enabling? Great question. We'll definitely talk about that.
The difference between addiction and just having a serious problem.
Difference between addiction and having a serious problem. I love this. It's like, it's like you read my presentation and you know what I'm going to talk about. This is fantastic. good, I have us all prepped.
I guess the last would be a solution,
Solutions. Solution to what?
a problem.
Solution to the addiction or
Addiction.
solution to working with the person with addiction?
Working with the person with addiction.
Okay. How about I go like this? Solutions. I'm going to give you solutions, not just one.
Reasonable and unreasonable expectations.
Expectations. Reasonable versus unreasonable. Anything else? Yeah?
To deal with the frustration and impatience within myself towards the addict.
So dealing with your own feelings towards the addict. Okay. I'm going to, I want all of you to help me because I keep saying the addict and I want to say the person with an addiction. Does anybody know the reason why I'm trying to tease it out? Because sometimes it just comes out of our mouths. We don't actually mean that. But what's the difference between saying addict and the person with addiction? Labeling, right? So an addict has got a character flaw. The person with addiction is a person with a behavior problem. Right? Does that make sense? So it's externalizing the behavior. But we all make that, like, and I'll say it too. So if you guys could just help me by like raising your hand or something when I say it too, that'd be really helpful. So dealing with our feelings. Sorry, my shorthand is C, with our feelings. Awesome. Thank you very much for bringing that one up. That's really important. Yeah?
Social media addiction?
Social media addiction. So with the social media addiction, I'm not going to get specifically about social media addiction, but I'll point it out when things are really relevant. And I think now that when I'm running through it, I think almost everything will be applicable. Everything actually will be applicable to social media addiction. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so if there's any more, let me know, because I want to cover everything. But that's a really fantastic list. Right? If you came out of here with that information, would you be happy about this presentation?
Yes.
Awesome. Would you tell all your friends that you went to a really great presentation? And you would come back to more of them every month? With them. Absolutely. Okay, good. Well, you're going to get all that information, so we're on track here. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Whoops. Agenda. Okay, we're going to talk about the cycle of addiction. What is the cycle of addiction? What is its impact on the family? Most of you have a really good idea of what impact is on the family, but let's talk a little bit more about that. What's really important is that we're not alone in dealing with the addiction. Because a lot of the feelings you'll already have noticed as we've been talking, oh yeah, that sounds similar. Oh yeah, that sounds similar as well. What can you do? What services are available? What are and how to use boundaries. So important. We'll do a little demonstration with that. And using this information and applying it to you. Okay? Sound like a pretty good agenda? Sound like a pretty similar agenda as to what you wanted? Nailed that one. Okay, cycle of addiction. First things first, that addiction is not a process, or not an event, it's a process. So one of the things that we did was we had a question on addiction versus serious problem. Well, there's not just a serious problem or an addiction. It's a continuum. It starts off with problem behaviors, right? And what happens is there's 5 life tasks that we always think about, or as a counselor I always think about. It's the work task. How are they doing in the work or the school task? How are they doing in the social task? Are they seeing friends? Are they seeing family members? How are they doing in the intimacy task? Do they have a girlfriend? Do they have a boyfriend? Are they actively trying to date? If they have any interest in that area. If they don't have any interest, they can still be functioning well in that area if the choice is there that they don't have any interest. Self-care. How is their self-care? Obviously, more times than not, when you have an addiction, self-care is really going to be lacking. And then spirituality. Spirituality can mean like a church or a religious thing, but it can also mean a community focus. So does this person feel connected to the community, to the universe, to something greater than themselves? All of those 5 tasks is how I evaluate how people are doing, right? What tends to happen is self-care tends to slide, almost one of the first things. They'll start, not going for their jogs, or not eating properly, not drinking enough water, let's say, or drinking too much alcohol or using too much drugs. The self-care will go. But also we'll start seeing slides in work, right? Social. A lot of times they'll either go crazy on the social, right? They're out all the time. Or they totally are recluse. You never ever see them anymore. It's a change in their behavior, right? Or at one point in time they were really involved in the community, or they were really involved in their church, and they're getting less so, right? The relationship starts to deteriorate, right? All of those things. That's how you know, right? Deterioration in those areas is when you know you start having a more serious problem. Okay? Does that answer your question? Pretty well?
Just list them one more time.
Work.
5 areas of work. Yeah.
Social.
Yeah.
Intimacy. Self. Spiritual. It'll be interesting how you all remember that too, because typically you'll remember that in the priority that you put it. Work is my first thing. I've got a bit of a problem with work. I love it. But some people will remember the spirituality piece first, right? And that's actually kind of a neat thing, little self thing to do as well. Kind of where you fall in those 5 categories. It's really important to know that it's not, the cause of addiction is not genetics. Even if you in here are an addict, or your grandparents were an addict, or whoever in the family was an addict, it did not cause that person. Pardon me?
People need addiction on that.
Thank you. See? I love it when somebody catches me on that. It's not caused by genetics alone. It's also not caused by environment alone. It's the 2 that come together. Not a single one of you in here can change your genetics, correct? Yeah? Can anybody change what environment a person is always in? You can change sometimes the environment, but can you control your daughter, son, uncle, aunt, where they go to? No. So it's not your fault. Come on, you guys. It's not to say it's not my fault. Say it. It's not my fault. You can't change those 2 things. You cannot change those 2 things. Therefore, it cannot be your fault. And the more that we get that, the more we can get what to do to help it. Whose behavior can we change? I didn't hear that. Whose behavior can we change? Ours, right? Nobody else. We can't change anybody else's behavior, even though we'd really like to try. Often trauma leads to addiction. Now when I say trauma, people think, oh my gosh, it's this, somebody got perhaps raped or something like that. It doesn't have to be big T trauma. It can be small T trauma, which is a smaller thing, but the perception there is a trauma. I'll give you an example. I had a client who also gave me permission to share this story, who had forgot their lunch bag at school. Big blow up when they got home because they were told on and on and on about not getting this lunch bag home at this one time. This person had some serious issues that stemmed from that specific argument. Would most people call that trauma? No. It was trauma for this person, right? And we had to work through it. So oftentimes, a perception of trauma can lead to addiction. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to self-medicate, right? They're coping. So one thing we can take from this is that in addiction, they are trying to cope with their addiction or their problem. They're trying to cope. They're not doing it in a very socially useful way, but they are still doing it. Something to cope. They know something's not right and they're trying to fix it. They're trying to numb it often, right? Or forget about it. Modeling. So sometimes modeling does come into effect. That you do have an aunt, an uncle, a grandma, a grandpa, a close friend of the family, a friend's dad, whatever, that you've seen the behavior before. Whether it's gaming, because gaming is a huge thing, right? I see a ton of 40, 45-year-old males that are coming to me, and honestly, they're coming to me, they come in appearing like they're about 16 or 17. And all they do is gain, well, they also usually use some drugs as well. But they're coming in like this, right? So it's not just one type of addiction, it's multiple addictions, and you can get modeling from all different sorts. There's some research to suggest that poor impulse control as a child is related to an addiction. There's actually quite a bit of research on this. Why I wanted to point it out is that are any of you guys parents to younger children? No? Okay. If you are, or if you can remember back to when your children were younger, it's really important to have consistent consequences and very well-established routines, and that's how you can have some effect on it. The law of certainty of attraction. Okay. If you don't believe the person with an addiction can change, the law of certainty of attraction will tell you that they will not change. If that person with an addiction also doesn't think that they can change, they won't change. Energetically, it won't happen. There has to be the energy of everybody supporting. Right? If you expect the worst thing to happen when you come to a presentation and your PowerPoint slides don't fill up right away, which is what happened to me today, I'm like, I know something's going to happen. We got it up and running. But the law of energy always prevails. Right? And the same thing with an addiction. If you believe the person's going to relapse, they will. Okay, I'm going to take you now to the sheet of, just in the back of the addiction resources. Sheet on climbing Mount Recovery. This is a fantastic handout from a book called Seeking Safety by Lisa Najidaitis. I can't ever say her last name. Najidaitis. Sounds better. The really important thing is that there's two ways a person is going to give up their addiction, right? There's the one that's going to go to cold turkey, which is trail B, right? They're going to say, forget it, I'm never going to do it again, and they don't do it again. They're done, right? I don't know a single person that's ever taken this route and it's actually worked. I've heard about them in stories, but I've never ever counseled them. So I'd say most people take trail A. Trail A would be climbing the mountain and slipping every once in a while. But what do you notice as the person is climbing?
Slips get smaller.
The slips get smaller? 100%. Slips get smaller? Often? Huh?
Are they closer together?
They could be closer together or farther apart?
One person has help.
Pardon me?
Person has help.
Person has help, yeah, absolutely. Right? They have a rope to tie them to. They have supports. They're also going up, right? They're still climbing the mountain. So they have a slip that's a small slip, but they're still going in the right direction. That's something that we often forget about when people do have slip-ups, is that there's a ton that they've already learned during the time that they've been sober or free from addiction. And there's a ton that they learned from having that slip-up. Right? So please keep this in mind as you're supporting the person that you love, because they are learning. And it's a slip-up. It's not a regression back to zero. Okay? Super important. Okay. The impact of addictions on families. Before we kind of get into what I have to say, why don't you tell me a little bit about what impact does it have, or what can you guess it might have an impact on families, having somebody in a family with an addiction?
Trust is the biggest one.
Trust.
And
Absolutely.
uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Confrontation.
Pardon me?
Confrontation.
Confrontation. Anybody ever notice that there's sometimes confrontations in your family? Yeah?
Tense relationships.
Tense relationships? Absolutely. Financial hardships and drains. Financial.
Other relationship problems besides with the addict.
Other relationship problems.
I see pride and shame issues, like together. Pride, one person has pride and the other one has
Pride
shame.
in the addict or the person with an addiction.
Or the person without, and they're ashamed of the addict.
Pride and shame. Absolutely. Fear. Absolutely. How many have felt fear before?
Anger,
Anger. 100%. How many people have felt anger before?
health problems,
Health problems. You having health problems and the person with an addiction having health problems, right? Yes. Anxiety. Oh, huge. I'm going to go plus, plus, plus there.
depression,
Depression, absolutely. For you and the person with the addiction.
Abuse?
Abuse. You're being abused by the person with an addiction. Is that right?
Works both ways.
And you abuse the person with addiction. Well, I mean, collective you. Yeah. Absolutely.
Social problems?
Social problems.
alienation,
Alienation.
Loneliness?
Loneliness. That's a great list. What role do you find yourself playing? Do you ever find yourself playing the peacemaker? Well, I see lots of heads nodding for that one. Right? The super achiever, maybe you're the brother or the sister that's going to be awesome because your brother and sister or mom or dad, has lost it. What about the person that's continually covering up for the person? You ever play that role? Call in sick to work for them? Right? Typically, you bang on, it was bang on the list, right? You're less communication, there's secrets. Secrets are bad. Secrets are very bad. What are the things that, sorry.
Took some time to realize what's happening.
It took some time to realize what's happening. Absolutely.
And so, did we enable? I don't know.
You don't know if you enabled.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you right now that probably most of you have enabled because you love your loved one. But we'll talk a little bit about, let's talk about it right now. What's the difference between helping and enabling? Let's brainstorm.
Helping is helpful, enabling is actually doing damage.
Okay. So let me give you an example. See what you think, and anybody can help them out if they want. I know you all want to. If you have an adult son, I don't know you at all. I'm just creating a hypothetical scenario, just so you all know. Adult son living in your house, and you're feeding him, and he's not paying any rent. Let's say he's 45. I don't know. Just gonna throw that out there. He's got a major cocaine problem. I don't know, I'm just throwing random things out here. Are you helping him by letting him stay and pay no rent and feed him?
No.
Or are you enabling him? Okay. Why?
Because he can have money for drugs rather than pay rent.
You guys are both saying exactly the same thing.
You're allowing him to do the things that you really don't want him to be doing, but by providing the basics, the necessities of life, he can spend his time with his addiction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So some people would say if you kick him out, you're being a mean parent, you're not being a parent. I would say you are being a parent by allowing him to make choices about how he's going to spend his money. Does that make sense? Who wants to challenge me on that? I know there's always one person in the crowd that wants to challenge me on that.
Can you just repeat what you said?
Yeah. I argue, and a lot of addictions professionals will argue, that by having the person in the house, when you are providing food and shelter for them and they're continuing their addiction, that the strong parent, the best parenting practice, often will be, depending on the situation, often will be to have that person go out into the world and choose if they want to spend money on housing and food or alcohol and drugs.
It's called tough love. Like,
yeah, I don't want to use that word, but I get where you're coming from, because the whole tough love movement has a lot of other stuff that I don't want to bring in here. But what it is, you're absolutely right. You are being the parent by not enabling them. You're not enabling the behavior to continue. If that 45-year-old son was not addicted, they would be out there having a job and providing for themselves. At some point in time, you have to make a choice.
What if that 45-year-old son was paying room and board and still doing that?
Okay, then we're going to talk a little bit about boundaries, and that's the next slide. Okay. One of the things that we're going to talk about is, are you ignoring your needs? Did you once feel that you were going out with your friends more? Or were living within a budget more? Were you once the person that no matter what, if you said you were going to be there, you're going to be there? And now you're the person that can't commit to anything because just in case something comes up, you have to be there? Right? Sound familiar, hey? A lot of no's there. Unspoken rules that are in the family, right? Don't talk. Don't talk about the person with addictions. Don't talk about what they're doing. Don't trust. Don't trust that person is going to be there. Or that person's going to, their relapse is actually, bless you, is actually going to stick this time. Or that, the recovery is going to stick this time. Right? Don't feel. Ever notice that what you do is you start shutting off your feelings so you don't get hurt? These things they need to stop. For recovery for yourself and for your family, they need to stop. How are you going to stop that? You're going to start talking to your family members about what's going on. You're going to open the lines of communication. He said this to me, this is what's going on. She said this to me, whatever, right? The reason why that's important is because an addict will do whatever they can and tell whatever story they can to get what they need. And if you don't have an open line of communication, that's going to be very, very difficult for you all as a family to be a cohesive unit. You also want to talk about the positives in the family. What tends to happen is all of a sudden, all you talk about is the negative. Once again, you want to be a supportive, strong, familial unit. So talk about those positive things in the family. Talk about the positive achievements that each are making. Right? And concentrate more on that. And with the feelings, right? You might want to get your own counselor to be able to deal with your feelings. Or have some sort of outlet. A journal is a really fantastic one to get those feelings out. If you stuff your feelings, your body will let you know. Some of the things that I get a lot of is stomach issues. Ulcers. Irritable bowel. Tension and headaches. Back, especially lower back pain. Those are stuffed up feelings coming out of your body because you've not allowed them. It's absolutely amazing when we start expressing that, all of a sudden all these physical fatigues start going away for people. Okay, let's talk a little bit about boundaries. What I'm hoping for is 2 volunteers. We're not going to be talking about anything personal whatsoever. It's just a little exercise. 1, 2, there you go, come on over here, guys. Just gonna get you to sit here. Yep. You stay. And then you to sit over here. Who wants to be partner A? You'll go? Okay. Just gonna show you a simple little exercise about boundaries and about how you can recognize boundaries. And what I'm gonna get you to do is I'm gonna get you to put a line around where your personal space is and where you feel most comfortable with nobody going in that space. It's gonna be different for everybody. Some people make really, really wide circles, some people make really, really, really close circles. Your boundaries are your own. And what you're comfortable with is your own. How are you feeling? You're good? Okay. So now what I want you to do is I want you to come over here, right to the front of the circle here. And I want you to inch forward just one little bit and stop there. How are you with her being right there? Good? Okay. I want you to inch just a little bit more. How's that?
Yeah.
What do you feel?
Space, right?
It's your space, totally. What are you feeling inside your body?
Not much, but it ain't.
Okay. I'm going to get her to move one more. Would that be okay with you?
Sure.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I mean, it could be a friend. If I knew this person, it'd be fine.
Right.
You know, or, yeah, it's just like
Yeah. You have different boundaries for different people.
different people. Yeah.
Right? What was it like for you to move from here? And I kept asking you to move closer. What was that like for you?
It was easy for me.
It was easy for you. Okay. Would it be easy for you to keep going? One more step. I want you to go one more step. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Okay. He's super uncomfortable. You're
I'm
not.
totally uncomfortable. I was just like, I don't know,
Yeah.
different for
No, I
everybody.
totally get it. You guys come on up. Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's gonna be different, older, younger.
Everybody's different, absolutely, and there's no wrong. You guys
Yeah.
did a fantastic job. Thank you so much. What's really important about that exercise is that we're going to, once again, have different boundaries for different people, and different people are going to have different boundaries for the same person, right? What I noticed for her is it was easier for her, but what did you guys notice that she didn't go straight on? She didn't go like this, right? She went to the side, right? It's way easier to approach a problem from the side, right? And not be confrontational. When you have face-to-face, it's automatically in our society considered confrontational. So she did that in a very respectful way.
That's what animals do.
And animals do it too. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're animals, so yeah, it's absolutely, it's great. Yeah, no, you're right. What kind of boundaries can we set with the people in our lives that have addictions issues? What are good boundaries? What would be a good boundary for you that you'd like to start enforcing? Or maybe have thought about and not ready to enforce it? Or have other people told you that maybe you'd like to do, or that might be a good idea?
Keep your
Respect.
promise.
Whoa. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Keep your promise.
Keep your promise. Okay. So a boundary is keeping promises. Awesome.
Respect.
Respect.
Respecting rules.
Financial boundaries.
Financial boundaries. Having some. Like what? Give me a specific.
Not gonna help anymore.
Not going to help anymore. Not going to give money anymore.
Personal space.
Personal space. Absolutely.
Privacy. Same thing. Privacy.
Privacy. Yep.
Maybe it's okay to say no.
Maybe it's okay to say no. How about it is absolutely okay to say no? It's okay to say no. Yeah.
Consequences.
Consequences. Who said that? Awesome.
But I think consequences should be laid out, right?
They're related.
Yes.
Logical consequences.
Yeah.
Related.
Or well defined.
And well defined.
I was just thinking about good boundaries would be boundaries you can stick to, right? Because otherwise it loses its.
Absolutely. Boundaries you can stick to. So boundaries must be followed through on. So while these are all really good boundaries, only pick and choose the ones that you are able to follow through on. They are all good boundaries. Does everybody agree that they're all really great boundaries? Yeah? And wouldn't it be awesome if you can keep all of these boundaries all the time? Yeah? Pick the ones that you can follow through on and stick to it. It's much better to have one or two really great boundaries than a bunch that you're not going to follow through on. And pay attention to your feelings, just like I had them do here, and how I made you do the visualization at the beginning. Pay attention to those feelings, because those feelings are huge cues to when there's going to be a boundary violation and when it's not okay.
I'm wondering about conditional boundaries, where someone would say, okay, if this happens, I'm going to take action. And then the person with the addiction crosses that boundary for whatever reason. You say, well, now this boundary, you're really going to get it.
So is that holding a boundary, though?
No, and I just wonder if that's common or...
It's 100% common. It's 100% ineffective in dealing with a person with addiction as well. Changing your boundaries. You're not helping, you're enabling. Even though you're doing it because you're helping, you think you're helping, you're not, you're enabling. Okay, so how about, does that make sense? Okay, a little bit of that.
Well, it's fine to have those boundaries, but there's no way of really enforcing them on a person with the addiction.
Okay, so somebody give me an example of something that a person is doing. I'm gonna work with what you said because I get that all the time. Give me an example of somebody that a person with addiction might be doing. Stealing. Okay, right. And give me an example of an age that somebody might be when they're stealing.
15.
15, 22. Okay. So 15 different than 22, right? 22-year-olds in the house, they're stealing. Why are they in your house? I'm just giving food for thought, right? I'm not saying it's wrong to have them in their house. I'm saying that if a boundary of yours is that they're not stealing, and then they steal, and you keep allowing them in your house, or keep allowing them without being, right beside you at all moments.
Because they're dependent on you?
Because they're dependent on you, yeah.
Which could be right or wrong, like if you let them stay.
And again, this is why boundaries are so personal, right? This is why you need to decide for yourself what boundaries you want to uphold. You're not going to be able to some people will not feel comfortable with having their 22-year-old out on the street. They won't. And that's totally fine. I'm not saying anything. If it's causing a problem for you, though, then it's a problem. Then we need to talk about it. Right? Is it causing a problem either that they're out on the street or that they're not on the street? Then we need to talk about it. Yeah?
It sounds like the family members or the friends who are in relationship to the person with addiction, they need to do some work for themselves to follow through on if they have these boundaries to be able to then follow through on them, because I think that a lot of stuff comes up for the people involved with this person.
One of the biggest places that I can tell you that you can help the person with an addiction is by getting help yourself.
That's one of the first rules of caregiving.
First rules of caregiving, yeah?
Take care of yourself first before you...
Take care of yourself first.
Because, yeah.
Absolutely. Because you can't assist anybody else if you're not being taken care of. 100%. And if you're continually feeling violated because your teenage son, 15-year-old, 22-year-old, whatever, son or daughter keeps coming into your house and stealing, that's not taking care of you. That's not respecting you. You're also not respecting you. Tough to hear. I know. I can see it in your eyes. It's tough to hear when I say this. I'm only telling you what is true, what works. And I'll tell you right now, it's not just the families that are telling me this works. It's the addicts and the persons with addictions that are telling me as well. I didn't have to wake up. I didn't have to stop using. I had a place to stay and food to eat.
They got no job, they have no money,
There's no
place
choices.
to go, what do you do?
They have choices. If they weren't in active addiction, they would choose differently.
But until they do, what can you do?
Whose behavior can you control?
I understand that.
But, no, you don't understand, because you're saying but. And you know what, I know, I can see, it's not just you, I can see all around here, the buts are coming up in people. So it's not just you. Whose behavior can you control? Your own. Is it okay to have somebody in your house that is going against your boundaries? If you have somebody in your house that's in active addiction and they're not going against your boundaries, and they're not causing a problem, then it's okay. There's not an issue, right? If they're causing problems, that's when we have to look at a different solution. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, because I have lots of people that come to me and say, well, you know what, I have my 24-year-old daughter who is using lots of cocaine and going out partying all the time, and she's still respectful in the house, and you know, I didn't really want her to pay rent because she's kind of keeping up the 1 or 2 courses that she's taking. Should I do anything about it? I think it's amazing. I get this question a lot. Well, is it bugging you? Well, it's bugging me that she's not living her life right. Well, is she invading your boundaries? No, she's not really. She's kind of keeping up with sort of the stuff. Well, then what's the problem? Whose problem is it? It's hers, right? It's not yours. It's not really affecting you, and you'd like her to make better choices. But she's not stealing from you. Again, that's what I'm saying, is that each individual situation is different. And you need to decide for yourself, is there boundaries being crossed? And if so, what are your boundaries?
So if you are really uncomfortable with kicking your child out, your adult child out,
Yeah,
and they're not doing what you want them to do,
right?
is there a middle of the road way? In other words, say to them, I want you to pay, or for an example, I want you to pay so and so much rent for the next 2 months. Then after that, it'll be this much, and if you don't do it, you're out. Give them a bit of a leeway.
Yes.
and
So I'm just going to repeat that for the mic. So what you're asking is, maybe is there a middle of the road? Is maybe saying, you know, you got to pay a little bit of rent. I don't feel comfortable with your behavior, but I want you to pay rent now. It won't be full market rent, but you'll pay rent, and then you'll have some responsibility, and it'll make me feel better. Is that correct?
Well, it will allow me not to have to kick you out.
It'll allow
And
me
then-
not to have to kick you out.
And then increase the rent.
And increase the
Until
rent.
it's market value.
Until
So
it's
that
market
then they have
value.
choice of either othering.
Absolutely. Is that a good solution, anybody?
Works.
100%. 100%, because that's what you feel comfortable with. 100%. There's no right or wrong, that's what I'm saying. But you need to feel comfortable with what boundaries you're going to set, and you need to follow through with them. So important. A great one. Doesn't have to be black and white. So what can you do? Number one, we've already talked about this. Addiction is not your fault. Right? You did not cause the addiction. Get information about addictions, you're here now. Seek professional support for yourself. Come see me. You can also talk to somebody else in your family. It's really important to open up the lines of communication. There's a really big problem with treating your family members, but it's a conflict of interest, and it's very, very difficult to do. And you'll already notice that because you're probably already doing a little bit of it. So just as a little heads up, it's very difficult to do. As in, like, you know, let me help you. We'll try and get this off together without any other supports. You really need to have other supports in place. Or you need to have that rope, other supports other than you pushing that person up. Realize your limitations in helping an addict, a person with addiction. Right? You do have limitations, especially because your heart's so big and that you love them so much. So having somebody else to talk to, whether it's professional or somebody else, is really important to get that external, objective point of view. Stop doing the dance, which means when you are constantly in motion because of what the other person is doing, choose not to be. And that's what I said about, continue to go to different appointments. When you say you're not going to answer the phone after 10 p.m. at night anymore, stop doing that. When you say you're not going to provide any more financial assistance, stop doing that. Right? Don't do the dance. Don't be in flux with the person with an addiction because it'll drive you absolutely crazy because they're in chaos. Set the bottom line, more about boundaries. What is your bottom line? What's your bottom line, right? And one of the things is visualize him or her doing well. What would that look like? What are you going to see? And start looking for those signs. And as they're doing those signs, tell them they're doing those signs. Say, you know what, I've noticed that you picked up after yourself today, right? Thank you so much, because it makes it so much nicer around the house. Whether they're 45 or 15. Yeah?
Would this also apply to all the person with the addiction's friends?
In what way?
Well, Johnny has a friend that comes over after 1 in the morning, and suddenly there's noise and smells coming from the downstairs rec room.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely set boundaries with that. But that, Johnny is also allowing that person in the house and is probably creating the smells along with them, right? So again, what is your boundary and what are you willing to accept? Worrying is like praying for the manifestation of your fears. The more you worry, the more you're going to manifest that very fear. So instead of worrying, take that energy and choose what you're going to do and stick with it. And I have a lot of clients that stick up their boundaries on the fridge. That way, everybody sees them. You see them, they see them, everybody around, and it's a support system, right? Where you're all supporting those boundaries. How did we do in terms of talking about what you wanted? The one thing that local resources is the next thing we're going to talk about. There is a line called Access One, a toll-free number. It connects you to every addiction services in the Lower Mainland. Some of the things that they have as part of their repertoire of things that they can refer to is residential treatment, Vancouver Detox, which is a medical detoxification center. There's non-medical detoxification centers. There is Daytox, which is a outpatient program where they come in for different little seminars or blocks of time to do things like the complementary therapies. What you'll do is you'll explain what's going on. You can't actually book them in. The person with the addiction issue has to book themselves in, but they can give you some direction as to what are some of your options. Additionally, on the back of that sheet, the addictions resources, there's some things that you can take a look at in terms of websites. Candace Plater also has a book, Loving an Addict, Loving Yourself. I read through it and I had bought 10 copies. First thing I've ever done that actually, right away. And I automatically give it to all my clients.
And her last name is spelled Platter, Plattor.
That's right.
You can order it online.
Yeah, it's a terrific book. Okay, what did you learn? What did you learn tonight? What was the thing that stuck out most for you? What's the one thing you're going to change? Or the one thing that you'd like to change and do?
Communication, positive communication.
Positive
dialogue.
communication. Absolutely. Great. Thank you. What else is sticking out for you? Yes?
I'm not going to enable the enabler.
You're not going to enable the enabler. Okay.
I want it to stop.
It's got to stop
with
somewhere,
them,
right?
The person and the addiction.
Right. Because if you think about it, when you're enabling, are you helping the person with an addiction continue their addiction? Right. Do you want to do that? Do you want to have them stop or continue the addiction? Right? You want them stop. Enabling is allowing it to continue. Making it easier for the person to continue their behaviors. You can love somebody without enabling them. Just because you're not enabling them doesn't mean you don't love them. Anything else you learned that you didn't take away from tonight?
Work on the boundary.
Work on the boundaries. Work on what are your boundaries and enforce them. And enforce them. Yeah, great. Okay. Well, I wanted to leave you with this quote because it's an excellent one for tonight. Every artist was first an amateur. It's not going to feel super comfortable when you first start doing these things, but it will get easier and it will get better. Okay. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.